Thank you for sparing your time for this important discussion. We all know that this pandemic is really sad all over the world, of course, but there are some positive things associated with it. And one is, of course, nature is trying to just readjust itself, and we have witnessed that air quality is getting better during COVID-19. And we do know that as soon as this lockdown, either it's a complete lockdown or partial lockdown, it will, situation will get worse when it is, will be over. So I think before starting our discussion, I'll hand over to Dr. Abid to formally welcome our panelist and then give welcome remarks, and then I'll be able to open it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mariam and Aisha. Good afternoon, everyone, for joining us on this very important seminar, which is COVID-19 and air quality. I'm thankful to our guest speakers, especially those who have joined us from overseas. I appreciate their views with us. As Mariam mentioned, of course, one of the positive aspects of it is that due to this lockdown, where we find almost 50% of planet is confined into homes, where factories are not functional, where transport is not moving, and where other daily activities are suspended. Of course, this is a time for nature to heal its wounds. But one thing that I must say that the air pollution has already done its damage. So the research from Harvard, research from many other institutions and academicians, it is telling us that those who were exposed to bad air quality, they are more vulnerable to catching this pandemic. So although for the last few weeks since the lockdown, observing cleaner seas, and we are observing much better air to breathe. But then this is also a fact that because of living in a chronic air polluted environment, which was simply unbreathable, many of us, we are more prone to and more vulnerable to catching this COVID if all other factors they remain constant. The second thing that this relationship, it reminds us that if we can actually close down our activities due to this fear of pandemic, then perhaps we should also voluntarily try to, in the post-pandemic world, we should also voluntarily try to clean our air and give it a chance by voluntarily reducing some of the activities which are actually leading to air pollution and which are leading to climate change. We all know climate change is an outcome of human activities. It is no longer a natural calamity, and these are the human activities that needs to be rethink and reconsidered if we want to retain this comparatively safer environment and comparatively safer air quality around us after this pandemic is over. And I will also take this opportunity to welcome Malik Amin Aslam, the Federal Minister and Advisor to Prime Minister on Climate Change. Malik Amin Aslam is also one of the co-chairs for the COP, the next COP, which is now postponed, but he's already in the background doing some important negotiations with the member countries. And Malik Saab has also served on extremely important positions with IUCN. He is IUCN board member as well. So welcome, Malik Saab, for joining us, and back to Mariam to take this proceeding further. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abid. So I'll begin with the introduction of our esteemed panelists. So we have been joined by Professor Gabriel Filippilli, who is director at Indiana University in US. Since there is this time difference zone between Pakistan and US at this time, so he has sent us a recorded video to us, which I'll request Adnan to play after some time. Mr. Kanchan Mani Dixit works at Institute for Social and Environmental Transition at Nepal, and Mr. James Tyson has joined us from US Embassy based in Pakistan. And we have been also be joined by Rushati Das, who is Program Officer at Climate Action Network South Asia based in India. So the purpose is to, take this air quality situation from India, from Nepal, from Pakistan, and from the US to know what this COVID-19 has done to air quality index, and when the lockdown was began in different parts of the world, and what we can take policy options and way forward out of it. Thank you very much, Malika Meen Aslam Saab, for joining us. We know that Malika Meen Aslam Saab has around half an hour with us. So I'll begin with air quality situation right now in Pakistan. As of Pakistan Air Quality Initiative, the air quality index in Islamabad is 87, which is moderate. And the good news is that air quality index in Lahore is also moderate. It is 75 today. And Karachi also have moderate air, which is a 67 air quality index. And according to Pakistan Environmental Protection Agency, the air quality index for Islamabad is within permissible limit. The particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, these are also under national environmental quality standards. So there is this hope that in this difficult situation, the air quality is better. We all know that due to partial lockdown or complete lockdown in different parts of Pakistan, almost none of the factories are operational, so there are not much air pollutants in air, and people are staying at home. Public transport is not working, so these pollutants, of course, are less in air. I'll leave on the panelists that what kind of policy options or way forward we can take from that. We have also been joined by Bharati Chaturvedi, who heads the Chintan Institute based in India. And nowadays she is based in Canada, so we'll take her views about lockdown, air quality index, and lesson for the futures about Canada and India's together. So I'll now move to Ms. Rushati Das from India. Rushati, can you please tell us about the lockdown situation in India, and how public transport, factories, electric vehicles are working over there, and what kind of air quality index situation is in India these days, and what policy options as South Asian country we can take forward for future?
So right now in India, what we have known that since 23rd of March, the lockdown has been started, and all the, as Mariam has said, like all over the world, in all the lockdown has started before and after that time only. So industries, then transport system, then constructions, everywhere the situation has been everywhere. Everything has been stopped. So after declared, what we found that within 1 week the air quality has turned into a better, and since then and now it is quite a good in parts of part of India. I mean, in North India, I will be specific about North India, because Pakistan and India, northern part of India, is sharing the same climatic zone. So it will be easy for everyone to relate whether relate the whole scenario. So in Delhi, and in Amritsar and some parts of Haryana, all over. Now the air quality has come down to within the limits of 59 to 70, so which is quite a good and good to moderate also. So we and what we know, we have seen that within from October, in the past few years, from October to April and May, this air quality was around 400, around more than 400, and even last year it has been 496 at the maximum. So which is worst scenario. So I mean, this is because the pandemic situation, everything is locked down. So this scenario has been, I mean, the air quality has changed. But as soon as the lockdown will be over, all over the world, we will see that these scenarios will be, I mean, again the air quality will be the same what we have seen from years or from decades. So yes, we need to change the I mean not by removing human, or not by removing any other development, but we have to sustainably develop everything. Like we can do some work on stubble burning, or we can use public transport other than using the private cars, so that the uh, emission from transport sector will again comes down. And also we can provide job facilities in rural areas, so that urbanization, which is contributing a huge emission in uh, I mean so that will also come to an end. So there are factors which policymakers from all over the world need to come and make it, because it has been seen that if some work is done over some policy works is been done in Pakistan for the farmers, and they are improving their air quality, but but Indian government is not, if not provided the same kind of support to the farmers, then there will be no help. So because the air quality will is I mean they don't measure the borders, so whatever, vice versa, and everything will be there. So what we have to do is we have to cooperate with every country across the borders to come for a good air quality. And after this pandemic situation has given a taught us quite a good, how will I explain, this pandemic situation actually has given a taught us how nature can suddenly can change everything. So other than giving the
Thank you, Rushati, for sharing about air quality situation in India and telling some of the way forwards. Uh, can I switch to James now? His technical issue is fixed now?
Yes, of course.
I'm hoping it is. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you switch on your video so that we can see you as well?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you for your patience. And what I was trying to say earlier was thank you, Miriam SDPI, for hosting this chat. And it's very good, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, to take some whatever small positive we can take out of this crisis. So you mentioned our U.S. Embassy air quality program, and one of my responsibilities is to oversee or look after that program. So as part of that program, we have monitors at the embassy and consulates in Islamabad, Peshawar, Karachi, and Lahore. And what we have seen, similar to what Rushati said, is post-lockdown, the data from our monitors has shown reductions by several gradations by US EPA standards, I mean, in levels of PM 2.5 particulate matter, which is the matter that the very small particles that the Harvard study that I think Dr. Soleri mentioned has shown to be particularly harmful to human health and also to potentially exacerbate COVID-19. And so we've seen across the board since the lockdown went into effect more, I guess, fully into effect in early April, or by, starting from April 1, we've seen across the board reductions in all the cities, and it's been especially notable in Lahore and places that typically have higher levels of PM 2.5. And so I from what Rushati said, I mean, I agree. You would imagine that levels would then increase once these lockdown measures are lifted or calibrated in some way. And so as far as policy options, there are a number of options that I'm sure the Honorable Minister is considering, and that I've heard, including improvements to fuels and other measures.
Yeah, thanks, James. Since, as I told in the beginning, that Malik Amin Haslam has another meeting, so I'll now request Malik Amin Haslam Saab to give his point of view. Also, I have some more questions apart from air quality, that we have heard that and followed that Ministry of Climate Change is planning to provide job opportunities during COVID-19 situation by involving youth and labor in billion tree tsunami. So keeping in mind that there are a lot of dangers in this as well, because we have to take a lot of precautionary measures in that as well. So how you're taking this billion tree tsunami, because this is also one way which improves air quality, of course. And second is that wheat harvesting season is almost here in Pakistan and India, of course. So how do you see this smog issue, since India has complete lockdown and Pakistan has, in some provinces, complete lockdown, in some provinces is partial lockdown. So do you see this smog issue coming as intense as it used to be in the past? And if it is worse, or is situation would be the same, because there would be stubble burning, of course, by the farmers. So what protective measures would be Ministry of Climate Change taking to tackle that problem? And what other steps Ministry of Climate Change is taking for improving air quality situation during COVID-19 situation? And how regionally we can collaborate to improve this situation, because air pollution is such a thing which knows no boundaries. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mariam, and thank you for having me on this seminar. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. I think that we're going through a very tragic crisis, but one of the silver linings of this whole process has been this improvement in the air quality, and we've seen it in all the cities of the world, and particularly in Pakistan. For Lahore, it has been a very remarkable improvement, almost 10 times improvement in the air quality readings. And to me, it basically shows two things. One is that the strong linkage between transport industry and industrial emissions and the air quality, because the source apportionment that we have done for Lahore had shown that 40% of the emissions are coming from transport, and this COVID situation is just sort of proving that point practically, that with the transport gone, you see the emissions drastically improving in Lahore. The other second point that it shows is that if there is a strong will and participation of the people, we can turn it around. I mean, it is a reversible phenomena. Air quality, we've seen it go to really worse situations in Lahore over the past decade or so. But this 2 weeks has just shown that it only takes 2 weeks of pure commitment to make it reverse. So that is, I think, a silver lining of this whole process. What I really would like, and we are doing it in our ministry also, but I think STPI should maybe be doing a scientific monitoring of this situation, so that we can learn from it scientifically and have it sort of registered scientifically after this phase is over. So I hope you're doing that. So I think that we already were planning for the smog season in November, which usually occurs in October and November, and there are a number of steps that we had taken. One of the things that we have done was on transport fuel. We presently use Euro 2 quality fuel in Pakistan. So we had decided to shift to Euro 5 and Euro 6. And that is something which is ongoing, and we hope that by June we would have converted to those 2 quality fuels. And not all of our fuel is imported, so we are only converting on the importing fuel. But more importantly, we would be sending that high quality fuel into areas which are prone to air quality deterioration, so that that area does have the high quality fuel. We've also talked with the refineries to improve their quality of fuel, and the Ministry of Petroleum is in negotiation with them on a timeline for that to happen. But we hope that within 2 years we should be able to get that fuel improvement done. On the other side, I think we already had a project to set up these 10 new monitoring stations, specifically in Lahore. The World Bank, it's the Green Punjab project. Unfortunately, that has been slowed down because of the current situation, but we will be trying to make that come on the ground as soon as possible, so that this sort of a situation, it would have been ideal for us to have those stations monitoring real-time data and recording it, because at the moment we don't have the proper monitoring stations. You don't just have 2 stations working in Lahore, which does not cover the whole area as it should. So I think that part of the thing is important. What would also be important is that as we go into the, and hope if this thing does not really finish off by that time, we would be able to see the impact of stubble burning on air monitoring, because that has been a sort of topic for a lot of debate in terms of air quality in Lahore. Where a lot of people have been questioning whether it is only how much of an impact stubble burning has. So when you ask me about the smog season, if this COVID situation does not improve by that time, and we're still in a slowdown process, then the stubble burning aspect will be very important to study, because this is, I don't know if we will get this sort of a situation in the future again. You also asked me the question about this new employment scheme that we are looking at. Well, one of the economic consequences of COVID-19 has been on daily wages, who used to earn a living every day and then take back home, and they've been very badly hit by this. Our Billion Tree Tsunami project was ongoing, but it got stalled when the government orders for lockdown were put in place. So we specifically requested the Prime Minister to open that up, and so that we could work. It's mostly in the rural areas and open spaces, and we can work with the precautions of people wearing masks and doing social distancing. This is doable in this project. So he was kind enough to get that approval to us, and now we are working on in the rural areas, and we are we've given directions to multiply the people who are engaged in this process as daily wages from the communities, from the local areas, so that they not only plant trees, but they also get green jobs, which in this dire situation gives them a very, very welcome respite. And we've been receiving a lot of very positive response about this in the last 2 days. I've also been studying the model, the very important model that was used in the US. Actually, I remember the US ambassador, when he came to my office, he mentioning that, and that is of the conservation. It was called the Civilian Conservation Corps. this was a youth movement which was started by President Roosevelt when he came to power at the back of a very big depression in the US in 1933. And it went on for 9 years. It basically, the motivations were twofold. One was there was a large bulge of unemployed youth, which is what it is in Pakistan right now. And secondly, at that time, there was a sort of attack on the environment over there. There was a lot of timber extraction being done in the US. They had the Dust Bowl issues in California. So he married the two together, formed these co-ops, gave these people jobs who worked basically to plant trees and to establish national parks in the US. And it was one of the most successful initiatives taken. It took the US out of depression, but also created huge job opportunities, created the morale of the people when they were going into coming out of an economic depression. But of course, the situation, the only difference, big difference is that we're in a pandemic right now. So I think that if we can do the precautions right and get these youth people employed through these initiatives and keep a focus on reviving nature, I think this is we can turn this crisis into one opportunity that we can take out of it. And so I've been working on that, and we hope to multiply the employment opportunities through this project and make sure that we can at least keep a focus on nature even during this trying time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Saab, for joining us today. So before going to other panelists, since Minister Saab has to leave, so I'll request our participants or panelists to ask questions if they have from Mr. Saab.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Malik Saab, for joining us. Sir, I just wanted to inquire as to the percentage of fuel currently under use in Pakistan. So to import Euro 5, Euro 6 standard fuel from abroad is a good step. So how much of the fuel quantity comes from abroad? How much of it are we producing or refining here in Pakistan? So if I could, if you know the...
Yeah, I think for diesel, the percentage is about 70%. And for petrol, and these Euro standards apply on the diesel fuel, which is the more polluting fuel. On petrol, I think it's about I think 40 or 50% that we're getting from abroad. So basically, we did a survey on this, and the majority of the fuel which is polluting is actually coming from abroad in a low quality. So by making this step, it can have a drastic enhancement.
Any other questions? G. Dr. Suleri.
Thank you. We saw there was this meeting of SAARC that was called by Indian government, and then there was also the SAARC health ministers. They had a meeting. So are you planning any sort of regional collaboration or regional meeting in the context of this pandemic? Of course, whenever we used to talk about smog, we used to talk of collaborative efforts between Pakistan and India. So now in the post-COVID world, are you foreseeing that such collaboration, those would get strengthened, or do you think that the tendency for nationalism, it would get strengthened further and we will just be working within our borders?
No, I think that this issue of air pollution, and thanks for reminding me about this, I had this point on written down, is a regional issue. We have to deal it at a regional level, and we've been trying to get the collaboration at the region level. So I welcome this SAARC initiative. In fact, Pakistan is one of the countries which is also investing into putting its own money into this COVID fund. But I think linked with that, we should be talking about at least data gathering and data sharing at this time. As I said, it is very important that this period of time may not come again. So we need to have the data across the border at a regional level and recording it, and I hope if nobody else does this, STPI should do it, so that we don't lose out on this very valuable scientific data which is available at this time. This sort of a situation of a lockdown we may not see in the rest of our lifetime, but we should take this opportunity to actually record this data and do it across the border so that we can benefit from it when the time comes.
Thank you. We'll definitely take a lead on it, and we'll try our level best to support you in your reviews.
Aisha Kesarani.
Yeah, thank you, Mariam.
Malik Saab, sorry, Aisha, to interrupt you. I think Malik Saab was saying something and he is muted. So maybe you can go ahead with your question.
I'll just take this last question and then I have to leave. So if there is a question, I'll take that.
Okay, my question was related to the electric vehicle policy, and I last heard that there was some contention with the automobile industry. I just wanted to ask if there has been a consensus now, or if there is any update. Thank you.
Yes, we've been working on that policy, and it's an approved policy. There is a sort of turf war, which was unfortunate, actually going on with the Ministry of Industries. We're trying to sort it out. We have actually, from the Ministry of Climate Change, also suggested that we should go in for the two-wheelers, three-wheelers, open the door, and then go on to the four-wheelers. But I think that is something that we are really pushing for, and we hope that very soon we'll have that in place. It is in the ECC right now, so which is the last step. So hopefully it should be done very soon.
So we had a lot of questions from Pakistan side. We have one question from Bharati Chaturvedi based in Canada. She wants to ask you something. So I request you to stay for 2 more minutes. Bharati, over to you.
Can I be here? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So hi. Well, actually, I'm based in Delhi, but I'm stranded in Canada. Would be more accurate, since we can't take flights back anymore suddenly overnight. But my question was that we're having this this tussle that I think all of us in the region are going to have, because we're going to have to revive economically. This has been also a very extreme economic blow, whether it's to our informal sector, to our manufacturing, and there's real concern about how the economy will emerge after the pandemic is over. And I just wanted to flag this idea about really sharing ideas on how not to go back to the old normal, because we've seen, for example, the automobile industry, asking for in India for a huge amount of inputs and help to revive itself. And then we'll have a lot of other polluting industries. So I really wanted to flag the importance and ask, if we were actually going to also, as part of COVID, start talking as SARC, the SARC initiative, if we could actually start talking of a post-COVID economic revival that is green, because that, I think, is our dominant narrative today in South Asia. A lot of us are talking about that. And I also wanted to share that we're finding in India that the two-wheelers are actually turning out to be the most polluted. And the new thing that's coming out from transport specialists is actually freight, which is things like Amazon or whatever, whoever delivers, is actually a key polluter in transport, which is still not mainstreamed into our policies. So I wanted to flag those two things and think that because it might be very worthwhile for us to kind of look at share solutions around these kinds of transport challenges, because that's a huge component. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Malik Saab, any response?
Yes, I think that that's an important issue, and I think we're all very cognizant of the fact that we want to come out of this on a green pathway. Obviously, the world as we know it is going to change. There's no doubt about that. We hope and we should push that it changes for the better as far as the environment is concerned, because we've seen both the ferocity of nature. It can be very quick, and also the benefits of nature, living in clean air, having clean water and all that. So I think that it is important that we use this opportunity to go green, and I think we are doing that in Pakistan. One of the things that I've been thinking about was, somebody shared a document about, this is before COVID struck, and this was about disruptions to the economy, and that I was suggesting that the biggest disruption which could happen very quickly would be that we would start not having cars in our houses, but to go to a system where we would have something like Uber and then electric cars, which would be available to us within 5 minutes whenever we wanted, especially in urban areas. And that was something that was being discussed, that it could be happening very soon in most cities. But now, sitting in the lockdown, I feel that that is something that at that time I thought it was not going to happen very soon, but I think this is something that can happen. We are all living without cars right now. We're living very well. Maybe an Uber and an electric vehicle at call within 5 minutes, instead of having a car parked in the house and not using it 90% of the time, or going and parking it somewhere else. That sort of change I think is required, which would not only help the environment but also put us on a clearer pathway. And the other thing about air pollution was that there's a research from Harvard which has come out recently, which has actually tagged the pandemic with the air pollution, and it mentions that the transmission of air pollutants of this pandemic in the air get linked with the pollutants in the air. If there are less pollutants in the air, there is less chance of this transmission. And also the cities or places where people have not been exposed to high pollutant levels, the resistance level to this pandemic is high. So I think these are also important indicators to suggest that in any case, we have to go to a world with less air pollution, more green.
Thank you, Malik Amin Aslam Sahar.
I need to be somewhere else. Thanks a lot, and I think I'll be looking forward to your discussion.
So with this, I now request Bharati to continue with situation in India related to air quality, of course, and about harvesting point as well, because if the situation remains same, how do you see the smog issue and stubble burning in India and Pakistan? And of course, we also see that you are very much involved with biodiversity thing. So how do you see with this improved air quality, the birds are coming and they're surviving, about other species you want to talk about with improved air quality in different parts of the world, particularly India, and since you are also these days stranded in Canada, so I would like you to talk about Canada as well.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot. Like I said, it's lovely to see all of you, even if it's only on a screen, because we're all on lockdown now. But the first thing I want to say is that, while we're celebrating and we're deeply excited about these fabulous numbers around our AQI, Delhi today is 76, which I don't believe we've seen in several years. But Chandigarh at 50. I mean, who could imagine all this? But a couple of a few last week, we were supposed to light diyas or candles, and it was an act of solidarity for all the doctors that they were working on front lines. What happened was a lot of people burned fireworks as well. And we found that the air pollution spiked. It was literally last weekend, and we were monitoring that, and it was unbelievable. Even most of us were surprised to see that the spike could go up to unhealthy levels purely on the basis of this 1 hour of fireworks. So I think the first lesson that we learned from the clean air during COVID times, it's very, very easy to reverse. It took 1 hour of fireworks and we had unhealthy air in Delhi. Obviously, everybody else was far more restrained and didn't burn fireworks. Only our grand city, which is always doing something wrong, did this. I think the second thing that we have to learn is that one of the other studies says that people who have had long-term exposure to poor quality air are currently more susceptible to COVID. So, so quite often people say that, oh, the air is quite clean, so hopefully we won't get COVID. The point is, you've already been breathing for several years, you know, that cocktail of poisons, which is basically not fit to be called air. And that has already reduced your vulnerability. And I think that's something that we need to talk about in the public domain more than we do. That one of the reasons why we get so ill. I think a third point that we're really talking about is, we, you know, in Europe, they've even had NOx, you know, 30 to 60% drop in NOx, which is fabulous because, you know, of course, they don't have our levels of AQI, you know, they don't hit 999 for a few days. But the fact of the matter is that their air is also quite unclean. I think the fourth thing that's happening right now, and I just want to list these four things, is that April is a season when your crop, you do have minor crop burning. Don't forget, October is not the only season. We keep waiting for October and November. But actually, this is when you have some minor crop burning, which we saw last year. It wasn't to the extent that you see, but it is definitely there. So but we're not seeing it this time, and there are multiple reasons. One of the reasons is there's no farm labor available because a lot of the laborers have just had to rush back. And the second thing is, of course, there's very strict lockdown, which I think will be lifted now on the crops very soon. Although Punjab in particular, though Punjab is not the only place where this happens, but Punjab in particular has continued the lockdown. So it's not clear right now whether the crops will be allowed to stand, whether there'll be an exception, whether it will be harvest what you can. So I think if you look at these factors, the first going forward, I think there's going to be a whole need in a change of ecosystem in big cities, because a lot of the air pollution that we can control, and I think we have to divide it up into things we can do immediately and things we will just have to wait for the longer term. For example, India is in the middle of changing standards for its thermal power plants, and those standards had to kick in previously, but they haven't done that, and it's been extended. So the question, and now the question is, oh, it's very expensive, and it's how is it going to impact? But we can see that actually we can do it, and we need specific kinds of data. So we all have electricity. It's not that we're working without. People are working out of homes. The consumption might only have plateaued because industrial operations and all have come down, but thermal power plants are working. So my question is that here's this point that despite them working, why is it that the pollution has come down, since they're a very significant emitter? And I would cluster 2 or 3 of these difficult, complex questions and say, let us understand these for future policy making. To me, thermal power plants are very important, because to see 50 in Chandigarh and 76 in Delhi tells me that despite having 11 power plants, thermal power plants, within 300 kilometers of the capital city of India, we're still seeing fabulous air. So clearly, we need to understand what's happened. I think we also have to change the way work per se happens in big cities, because we have a huge informal sector, sure, that goes out, that works. But we also have a huge formal sector in all our big cities across both sides. And I think for 100%, we'll have to change that, because there is no private transport, there is no public transport that is able to take all these, and it's going to again, if we don't change that, then we're going to go back to what we were this time last year, whether it's monsoon readings, whether it is October readings. So we really have to get corporate and other work sectors, because now I think for the last 4 weeks, include large sections, including the government of India, I understand that our Ministry of Commerce has more or less been working on Zoom. So I think there is a lesson on rethinking work. And I think that is something we should be doing immediately, even before the COVID threat is over. We need to start putting this in the public domain. Otherwise, we're not going to have preparation time. And once we go back to status quo, everyone driving to work, that is very hard to reverse. I think one of the dangers I'm also seeing, apart from the ease of going back to status quo, is I think we're not having enough conversations um, on some of the other issues. For us, it's public transport in our big cities, but it's also fuel. And at this point, I'm wondering, we don't monitor enough, and so I'm wondering if there's actually a significant reduction in rural India, where people continue to have a mix of cleaner fuels and traditional fuels, which are extremely polluting and which cause a lot of deaths. India has 100,000 deaths every month. So I think those are some of the thoughts we need to know. As far as measuring and monitoring go, I think it's really worth doing something together, because while we are all measuring, we're measuring out of context. And at this point, the winds are not blowing from the Indian side to the other side. That happens later in the year during the monsoon, and then that reverses again by the end of the monsoon. So I think we should use our time locked down across the world. Every I know so many people stranded, and um, to figure out a protocol of monitoring data and asking a couple of joint big questions, whether it is about what are the best practices emerging on work, what kind of private transport can we now deter, how do you incentivize whether it's electric vehicles, where I really want to say that we have a policy in Delhi that would have rolled out by now, but we're very worried about it, because who's going to deal with the mountains of batteries? We've had huge issues with those in previous years, in vehicles and batteries, and the toxicity that comes out of them. So unintended consequences are also important. And I'll end there by saying that I think going forward, we should really share data in a couple of cities, and we should really look at one or two interesting things that can come out and we can start working on before lockdown happens. And Chintan and Facebook had come together along with AIMS, which is a premier hospital in India, one of our most eminent hospitals, headed by one of the key doctors who works on air pollution, rolling out a campaign, which we will do, I'm guessing, after the monsoon is over now and post COVID. And we'll be very happy to share all the material. We've made fabulous little films and very cute cartoons and all of those. And maybe that is something we can do jointly, and perhaps Facebook Pakistan can support SDPI, because they're finally, the material exists. You could get some more, and that's something we could do, taking advantage of uh, public confidence in the idea of clean air.
Thanks, Bharati, for sharing different aspects around air quality in detail. We have heard a perspective of Pakistan, India, and some part from Bharati about Europe as well. I'll now request Kanchan from Nepal to share some points from Nepal, please.
Hi, Mariam. Thank you. Let me start by giving a brief, situation analysis of this COVID in Nepal. Our lockdown started on March 24th. Now it's already been 20 days, and it is expected to go by end of this month, end of April, because we have open border of India, and there are the cases in India are really increasing. So till now we have no death in Nepal. We have 1 recovered and 13 infected, and a couple of people on isolation, and either on the border side or in Kathmandu and other parts of the country. So all the transportation in Nepal have been halted except emergencies and for the groceries and vegetables. And regarding livelihood, the poor are hardly hit in this lockdown, and there are cases like about 500 to 600,000 people are living towards their homes out of Kathmandu Valley in these 20 days, and they most of them are walking 500 miles or 600 miles walking, so that's huge task for them. The other thing is that and the case we have in Nepal are broadly came from Qatar, Belgium, and France, and some are from India. So there is no case inside Nepal that it's been transmitted from one person to another. So till now we are safe. We don't know. We are expecting to remain lower than this. So regarding air pollution in Nepal right now, I was scrolling down through the real-time data. This morning, the air pollution data in Nepal were around 150 to 178, making it still unhealthy to breathe. And I just checked the data, and now we are in moderate to some unhealthy situation for the sensitive people. Still, I don't know. We are having this regardless of 20 days of lockdown and banning off all the vehicles. The pollution level in the Kathmandu is still higher than expected. And this might be due to the cloudy days or maybe the cool night and temperature inversion. But the dust, regarding the visibility, the skies are, the Himalayas are clear. And this is the first time for so many years people have seen Himalayas so clearly. And I have heard this from Indian side too. People have been able to see Himalayan clearly. So, for this about 38 to 40% of the pollution in Nepal come from the vehicles, and these are the poorly maintained vehicles, and the fuels are, most of the fuels are either uh, adulterate, or they mix some kind of chemical to it, making it inefficient. And 25% of the pollutions come from gravel road and road maintenance, the dust part, and only even 11% from brick factories and 3% from the industry. So looking at this, it's a more or less like in Pakistan scenario, where 40% of the pollution is from vehicle itself. So I'm not sure, with the reduction in so much vehicle in Kathmandu Valley, the pollution level is still very high. If you look at the data, we estimate around 35,000 people die annually due to health illness, due to illness caused by air pollution in Nepal. So this is quite a big for a small country like Nepal. And most of the non-smoker are having similar type of symptoms that of the chain smoker. So it is really threatening for us too. Regarding the policy options, I think since the vehicle use of vehicle and maintenance is really linked, we think the properly checked vehicles would be one of the most comes in the prime. Can you hear me? Because I'm.
Yes, Kanchan, you're audible.
Can you hear me, Mariam?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. By 2020, government planned to replace at least 20% of the vehicles with the EVs. But the process is very slow. Until now, I think it's only 10% of the vehicles have been replaced with EVs. And we plan to, government need to promote EVs, and also the electricity should be provided to the public in affordable price so that they can be used to recharge the EVs. And another thing is we need to have more trees alongside of road. We used to have a lot of trees in Kathmandu Valley. I remember, all on the both sides of road. Now all of them are gone. The trees are gone. So the government of Nepal really need to focus on planting trees on side of the road. And also I I suggest promoting bike lanes in Nepal. We had bike lanes in Lalitpur for some time, but it's all gone. People fear that if you ride a bike, bicycle, then you get into accident because there are no rules and regulations and no separate lanes for the bike. So I strongly feel that it needs to be promoted. Thank you, Mariam.
Thank you, Kanchan, for sharing situation of Nepal. I remember when last time I went to Kathmandu, the air quality was really worrisome because the visibility because of the particulate matter and dust was there at that time as well. And maybe, Kanchan, you have highlighted some of the policy options which can be implemented in Nepal. So maybe you have talked about regional bus, but there was some voice breakup. Maybe I have missed that. Can you highlight some of the policy options or other kind of recommendations which we can do as a region instead of only focusing on Nepal?
I strongly support Bharati's agreement, concern with the need to share data and start dialogue in this time of pandemic when there are no, people are staying home and still have time to interact with each other. I think that's most important.
Thank you, Kanchan. I'll now request Adnan. We have taken one of the Professor Dr. Philip Lee from US.
I'm Gabe Filippelli. I'm a professor of earth sciences and director of the Center for Urban Health at Indiana University. And I'd had an opportunity last year to go to Pakistan as part of a US State Department mission to understand and communicate the sources of air pollution in that context. And I study air quality quite a bit here in the US. This pandemic has caused some substantial changes in human behavior, obviously, and one of them is the stay-at-home orders that are in place across the United States. These stay-at-home orders effectively keep people at their home with minimal transport. Most factories and manufacturing facilities are closed or extremely limited. And people's driving habits are very much different. For example, here in Indianapolis, we've seen a 90% reduction in vehicle traffic. Indianapolis is a city of about 1 million people, so it makes a big difference. So one of the biggest factors that they observed in China, in Wuhan, when they suffered the beginning stages of this terrible pandemic, is that industrialization and, of course, transport shut down completely. And as a consequence, the air was scrubbed, in a sense. The air quality improved substantially. Now, we've started our own shutdown in the middle of March this year, so approximately 3 weeks ago. And what that shutdown here in the U.S., throughout the U.S., usually entails is the cessation of these kinds of activities. And a number of us researchers have been trying to examine two things. Is one, do you see an improvement in air quality from these shutdowns, and what are the likely sources? And two, then how might it factor into human health and people's own perception of their environment? So we've done some studies here in Indianapolis using air quality monitors. And we have a number of different monitors, one system for particulate matter and other systems for the gases like nitrogen dioxide and ozone. The sources of these are different, right? There's some similarities. Particulate matter, this PM 2.5, can be emitted from the combustion of low quality fuels, for example, and burning of crops and all of those kinds of activities. Whereas the NO2 and ozone are more related to combustion alone. So it's the use of coal or gasoline or diesel or natural gas. When we've examined this in Indianapolis, we found we did a comparison of the last 3 weeks, this year versus the last 3 weeks last year. The problem with air quality as a metric is it varies over time because of factors of human emissions, right? But also because of atmospheric conditions. So we needed to make sure we had a long enough time window to be able to clearly see what signal we might see. And in fact, what we saw in Indianapolis is a 38% reduction in one of these emission gases, NO2, from 2018 to 2019. So a substantial reduction in this, what they call a criteria air pollutant. NO2 causes breathing issues, including asthma, and is particularly problematic for people with a pulmonary disease and an advanced pulmonary disease. This 38% drop is of substantial enough value and was for a long enough time period to indicate that it really was human activity. It wasn't just weather. This was clearly the human footprint of reduced emissions. Now, in Indianapolis, the reduced emissions are probably largely because of transport-related reductions, so less vehicles on the road. And we saw that correlated quite well to a drop in road traffic measured by our Department of Transportation. So this link, I think what's interesting and informative about this is that it's a small distance between our human activities here locally and net improvement on the environment locally. So when you think of something like climate change, you think, well, this is a global issue. How are we going to deal with this as a global problem? You can't, the link isn't always this tight. With air quality, it's extremely tight. And we've been able to document that stay-at-home orders cause within 1 week an absolute cleaning out of the air. And I think you're seeing it there in Pakistan and in India and other places in Southeast Asia where the air is clearer than people have ever seen. Okay, so what's the ramifications of that in the global context? Obviously, it's tragic that it takes a pandemic to see that link, but sometimes major shocks to systems can result in greater awareness and education. When we weather through this pandemic, I think that we need to remember a couple lessons. One of them is that we have a direct link to our own local environment. Our actions can improve local health. And this is, with this COVID virus, this is particularly telling, I think, because if you recall from other studies, we know that areas that have substantially poorer air quality over like year time frame, the outcomes for patients, the severe illness of patients is much, much worse than areas with cleaner air. So this is really critical point, I think. So not only do we see that immediate improvement, but if we can sustain this, if we can fully understand how important it is to clean up our air and to improve on issues like with carbon emissions for climate change, global climate change, we could substantially improve our local and global environment while also improving health. So I hope that this has been informative, and I'm sorry I can't join you in person. It's our holiday evening, and it would be about midnight for me. So I am happy to answer any questions you might have offline. gfilippe@iu.edu. Have a very safe month.
I now request participants to please unmute their mic if they have any questions from the panelists. In first round, we'll take 3 questions. Dr. Imran Khalid.
Yes, thank you, Mariam. It's more of a comment as opposed to a question. I think we are starting to see the benefits of air quality, but what can we do at this time? That's the question. So I think Gabe Filippelli alluded to the health issues. He talked about asthma and how that's directly related to air pollution. So something that we can do as researchers is perhaps to join in with the medical practitioners and see the number of cases that used to come in, hospitalizations that used to happen in terms of the asthma attacks, and whether there has been a reduction in that. I'm pretty sure if we were to do this across the world in the major cities, we'll find that there's definitely been a reduction in hospitalization of cases where people came in with issues pertaining to breathing, for example. So the second thing is, once we start to do that, that will allow us to really build on this research that discusses how air quality impacts health and how that in turn affects the economy. So there is a monetary number that we put on the impacts of air quality on the economy, and it's out there, and it's a significant portion of the GDP, but people really don't pay attention to it because the air pollution problems, they're not considered to be as aggressive as perhaps the COVID. But if we had this data, that would really allow us to move forward and ask the policymakers to perhaps look at that when making decisions. The second point was that we need to initiate plans for public transportation. That's going to be key. Now that we know that the fuel quality, and we've been talking about the importance of fuel quality for a while now, but now everyone knows that fuel quality is the key culprit in major cities. We can really try and address that. And the new electric vehicle policy that's coming up, obviously 2 and 3 vehicle, it can be used to address the public transportation problem that we're having, and we can have buses run on that on electric mode of energy, so that our reliance on diesel fuel and our reliance on polluting petroleum products is reduced. So just these couple of interventions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Imran. Do we have any other question before we get to conclusion? Bharati, do you have to add something?
Hi. Yeah, I just, well, thanks, Imran. I just want to flag this issue which occurred to me, which I thought while Imran was speaking, was that we maybe, I think we're not thinking hard enough about diesel in agriculture. And because it's quite difficult, obviously, to monitor all kinds of parts of rural landscapes. But I think since so much diesel is used, whether it's for agriculture, whether it's whatever forms, whether it's transport or actually machinery, I think we need to start thinking of that as well. I just want to flag it. It won't happen very soon, but if we don't put it on the plate, then it won't happen at all. That's all I wanted to say.
If I may, Bharati, that's a good point. I think we really need to have a source apportionment study done on a continual basis for us to really point out where the key areas are when it comes to our air pollution. And unfortunately, that hasn't been happening in Pakistan. And unless and until we have long-term source apportionment studies, not across South Asia, if you're talking about it on a regional basis, we won't be able to get to a point whereby we could say that where we could reach a really pure air quality, because we'll still have issues with air quality if we don't know where it's coming from. I mean, it could be from dust. The past couple of days, the air quality has not been as good as it was a few days back, and the reason perhaps is because of the change in wind direction. The reason perhaps is because of the dust that's coming in from the Middle East, and that happens too. But we are not sure why our air quality is changing, and we can address that by doing source apportionment studies. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, that's not happening to the extent that it should. And once we start to have those studies done and the data is out publicly, then we can perhaps really address your comments, which by the way do make sense as far as agriculture and rural areas are concerned.
Thank you very much to the panelists for making it today for this very fruitful discussion, and I have noted down some of the policy takeaways which panelists and participants have highlighted. And I'll reach you out, as I mentioned earlier, about data from respective countries to develop policy brief so that we can give our respective government a way forward. So yes, the question has popped up: is dust is making more pollution than any other thing else?
What making more?
You can read
Oh
in
yeah,
chat
yeah,
box.
yeah, yeah. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. So, I think what's important to note is that dust is not just a thing out of context. I mean, dust comes because you have particulate matter, and there are multiple sources, as we know, for particulate matter. And so, yeah, dust is extremely important, but I feel that we don't do ourselves a favor by and I see very often in policy documents dust management. But dust management includes you know having more trees, having multi-layer vegetation, but it also includes not burning waste and so on, which then leaves residue and particulate matter. So I think dust is a really, really major thing, but we should also problematize what is this dust and break that down, because dust is the way in which even PM2 and PM10 and larger PMs are also dust. And some of them come from particulate matter, which comes from, say, diesel. So, or construction activities. We didn't talk about construction activities, but I think that's another area of working that we can do, because we have these huge emerging townships, across South Asia. We're doing this urbanization surge in the next coming decade. And construction also contributes hugely, including to dust. So I think we forgot to use that word dust, but the dust is a sum of all kinds of pollution, and we should really focus our attention to key causes of that dust.
Thanks, Parity. I hope Amjad Saab has got his response. With this, I'll conclude this session. Thank you very much to the panelists for making it today, and I do look forward to document it in the form of policy brief. And thanks to the participant for listening patiently to our panelists and participating in this very useful discussion.